Gentlemen, good morning. Thank you very much indeed. I hope you are all nicely refreshed, and if it's like me, I've had far too much coffee this morning, so I'm absolutely buzzing in my head. But welcome to this parallel session, and we're going to be talking and looking at end and edge technology. So that is the stream we have here. Now, there might be some colleagues here that were undecided if they wanted to come in this room or the other room, and you may have chosen one or the other. Don't worry, they're all recorded, and you can get access to all the recordings and presentations after today as well. I'd like to welcome our guests that are on the webinar as well. Welcome, thank you very much for joining us online. And if you are online and you have any questions, I've got my colleague Simon here who will talk in the chat box. And please put your questions into the chat box, and Simon will ask those questions during the Q&A session at the end of this session here. And for people in the room, what we'll do is we're going to have Naomi coming up on the stage in a minute from Network Rail to talk about the background of the competition. Kelvin from Innovate UK is going to talk to you about the scope of the competition, and then we've got a good session there for questions and answers, and a good sort of interactive session with the panel. So if you can just keep your questions to the end, that will be great. Then after that we break for lunch, and so fantastic. So without further ado, Naomi, thank you very much. We need the edge detection on this bit, don't we? There we go, it's the one on the right.
Hello. Oh, I'm very short. Can you all hear me? Marvellous. Okay, so I'm Naomi Latimer. I'm a senior security specialist in group security for Network Rail, and I am the technical lead for the platform End and Edge technology project to look at how we can deter trespass from these locations. So, as you can see on the screen, it's not fatality focused, not because we don't care about fatalities, of course we do, but actually there are very different reasons that people trespass. So it's not just about going off the end of a platform to commit suicide, but actually people do it for fare evasion, because it's fun, because there's a great place down the track that kids can go and get drunk with their friends and be undetected by their parents. There are loads and loads of different reasons. So actually what we need to look at is how we can deter those people from wanting to go off the ends of the platforms. Now, aside from the ends of the platforms, there's also the edge. I'm quite sure you've all been to a train station, so you know that there is that nice steep drop. Some people, however, don't see it as that steep a drop and like to hop off the edge, straight across the tracks, up onto the next platform, because the safe walking route apparently is too far, or they're intoxicated, or actually they don't know the way, they can't find it. There are loads and loads of different reasons. So we need to look at how it is that we can reduce this, hopefully stop it altogether, but actually it's got to be about deterring people from doing it. And to do that, we need to detect it. So to help with this, I just want to show you some pictures of some platforms. Now, these platforms are in some of the locations that we have very high trespass rates. Now, as you can see at the ends of these platforms, there are some tiny little gates, which are actually there to stop people going off the end of it. Now, even me, short as I am, can get over that gate. But because of the gauging of the trains, for the other project, it's actually impossible for us to have really high gates there. So we need to look at other solutions for it. What else can we do? Now, you might see next to that, there's also a level crossing. Just off to the right of the picture, you can see the bike wheel. People quite often go from that level crossing, hop over those teeny tiny gates so they don't have to pay for their train ticket. So what can we do to stop that? There are signs there, as you can see. There are other little fences. There's also a nice, safe walking route there. But to go through it, you need to pay your fare. Another platform here. Now, what you won't be able to see is in the very far distance, there is actually a little viaduct that if you walk all the way down the side of the track, gets you to lots of other places in this town. I'm not going to tell you where it is, just in case you decide to follow that route, please don't. What people do is they go along the edge of this platform, and then they go over these teeny tiny little black things at the end. They're called witches' hats. Have a better picture for you in a minute. And they walk along the side of the track, which means that all the trains that are coming along are then cautioned, so go a lot slower, and all the passengers on the train get really cross because their train's delayed, and everybody at the station's delayed. And essentially, it costs us an awful lot of money. And by an awful lot of money, we're talking millions and millions of pounds every year, which, by the way, helps increase your ticket price. So these are the witches' hats. As you can see, they don't go all the way across because the gates are there. Now, the gate is there to stop you from going over that. Now, again, if you're a teenager of any kind of athletic ability, I'm fairly sure you could climb over that. Even me, my drunken stupor on a Friday, could probably climb over that. But the witches' hats are there to help with this. They're also a marvellous tool for children to play on because they're really good fun to balance on. So they're not that good a deterrent. But they are what we've got at the moment. So we need to look at how we can improve this, because if that's good fun for a child to play on, a teenager that wants to walk down the track to do some graffiti, or, get drunk with their friends, as we discussed earlier, or just skip out on paying their fare altogether, that's not very much good deterrent. The other problem with it, there's nothing there that tells us when they're doing that. So actually, we might find out they're halfway down the track. There's no detection there. So we can't deter it if we don't know it's happening. Another problem, another station. Tapering platforms. So they're not all the same width. They go in at various rates. You've got the signals there, you've got the overhead equipment. There are lots and lots of barriers to putting in physical barriers. That's not to say they can't exist, but we need the right thing in there. Hence our solution looking at physical and technological solutions that can work together. With this, you can see all the way down the track in both ends. In fact, if you look at the second picture, where you have the nice big tower block, shortly before that, there's a lovely little box that is known for a graffiti spot. And if you can get your graffiti on there for more than a week, apparently there's a reward. So these are the sorts of things that we're up against when it comes to looking at ways to stop it. So our aims. As much as it says to detect trespass, our main aim is to deter it. We need to stop the trespass from happening, because actually that's how we keep people safe. That's how we stop people from dying, whether they're intending to or not, because actually it's a really dangerous place to be. And whilst we've got all the education in the world, if people can do it easily, they will continue to. So we want to deter it. To do that, we need to detect it. We need to understand what the problem is. In some areas, we've got really good understanding. We've got a trespass improvement programme, which is not about improving how you trespass. It's about reducing it. It's just a bad name. At the end of the day, that programme is there to look at the different reasons why people trespass. And in some locations, it's really well known. We know that in some stations, people do just hop off the edge of the platform straight across, because when they're drunk and they're about to miss their train, it's the easy option. But that's not the same at all stations, okay? So we need all of these solutions to be transferable. So actually, we need to be able to scale it up, scale it down. We've got stations in the back of Scotland that have no power at all, but they've still got trespass. And there's still people in danger. And we need to protect them from the railway, because actually it is a dangerous place. So if we're going to deter trespassers, we need to look at why they're there, how they're getting there, and what can we do to stop it. We need to allow for a response, because if we do have a child on the train station, I'd quite like to know if they're about to walk off the end. If they're in danger, I'd quite like to know so we can get somebody to them. But actually, if we don't know they're there, we can't arrange a response. So we need to look at how the technology and the physical structures can actually get somebody to them, whether that's a station manager, whether that's the police, whoever it is, we need to make sure that somebody knows they are there. And finally, we need to save some money, okay? It's costing us a lot of money, okay? If we can reduce the amount that it's costing, that would be great, really good, because we can't afford it, okay? We're a public company, come on. We need to save this money for everybody. All right, at the end of the day, trespass costs too much money. It's causing too many dangerous situations, and people are losing their lives for this. So let's try and find some solutions to look at. I'm done.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Naomi. Very interesting. What an interesting challenge that is, and a problem. Great. Kelvin, would you like to come up and talk about the actual competition process? That's the one on the right again.
Thanks, Rob. Good morning, all, just about. Here's my challenge now. So I'm Kelvin from Innovate UK again. My challenge is that what I'd love to be doing is standing on this stage showing pretty pictures of potential solutions and interesting technologies like Naomi's just done. But my job is to take you through the scope. And the competition scope is what the competition scope is. So there's nothing that I can say now to embellish it. The response to the competition, if you choose to apply into it, needs to be against the scope as it is published. So what I'm going to do is to take you through the scope. It's identical to the content online, but we're happy to take any questions at the end to clarify any questions you might have. So, as Naomi says, the competition is to do with platform end and edge, and we've very conveniently provided an example here on the stage to illustrate some of the challenges. This could do with witches' hats, I think, in fact, because it is a fairly dangerous environment to be in. In terms of the briefing event today, the main objective of the briefing event is to allow Network Rail to present firsthand their challenges to you, the potential applicants into the competitions. But as well as that, if you've not been to these briefings before, we will set out the aims of the competition, we'll talk about the scope, we will allow you to ask questions. It's all recorded, so you're not privy to any information that isn't available to all applicants across Europe. We've talked already about the knowledge transfer network and the catapults, but most importantly, and I was very pleased to hear the buzz over coffee, it is an opportunity for you to get to meet each other, and that is the primary reason that we actually host these events, is to allow the innovation community to bring together a sum of the parts which is bigger than their individual contributions. So, you've probably all had a quick browse of the competition brief, which is why you're here. We have, on behalf of Network Rail, the opportunity to commit 1.08 million plus VAT. We'll talk about the plus VAT issue several times, but the important thing for you to remember is that when you craft your application, please use the published figures in the competition brief, but add VAT. The competition is open to all organisations. So be you a university, be you a research and technology organisation, be you a small business, or be you a large business, you are eligible to apply into this competition, and it is open to organisations from across Europe. The funding is 100%. Everyone likes that. It has pros and cons. It's 100% because it's an SBRI competition, but what we are doing is procuring a demonstration of your innovation. So when you sign your contract, you are committing to deliver that demonstration on Network Rail property. Your project costs, as you probably will know, there's a bit of flexibility. If you think you can achieve everything that the competition scope requires for 200k, then bid for 200k. If, on the other hand, you feel you need 360k, you have that option, and you should scale your application accordingly. You have 16 months. During those 16 months, we expect to see a trial on Network Rail stations, 2 stations for a full calendar year to account for the seasonal variations, both in the weather and also in the trespass patterns. And the key demonstration is a development and a demonstration of your technology, which might be a technological or physical solution or a combination of the two to deter and detect trespass. So, the scope is what the scope is. I'll go through this relatively quickly because all of you will have seen it online, but to remind you, in case it brings forth any questions for today, the objectives are detecting and deterring trespass off platforms, as Naomi says, for fair invasion or shortcuts or malicious purposes. Committing crime is one of them, cable thefts. I think Naomi mentioned cable thefts, fair evasion, obviously, vandalism. And the solution that you will demonstrate may be physical or may be based on other technologies, so IT in particular. As part of the demonstration, we'll expect you to demonstrate this on behalf of Network Rail at 2 stations. Those 2 stations will be allocated to you as part of the startup process of this competition. Some stations, as Naomi says, may have no staff. I didn't know they didn't have any power either. That's an interesting challenge. But certainly there may be no staff on hand. There may be a medium-sized station with some staff on hand, perhaps over small periods of the working day, or obviously if one of those stations is a major terminus, a London terminus or a regional terminus, it may have staff on hand pretty much 24/7. The solution must not only detect the trespass, but needs to be capable of making the Network Rail or TOC employees aware that that trespass is taking place. We've talked about the demonstration. We expect to see a proposal for a trial in a station for 12 months. So you've got a period to refine and develop your innovation, and then a shorter time to deploy it, and then a long period in which to demonstrate it, to record how well it performs, and if required, to tweak the algorithms or the physical implementation to make it even better. You know the goal is to install trespass reduction solutions that work for the end user, which is essentially Network Rail. Competition timeline is likely to look like this. So we have roughly 3 months for development. So that's where you'd be taking your concept, preparing it for deployment on a station, tuning it if necessary to make it work even better. Then there's a 1 month period where you will install this system on Network Rail property. And then there is the 12-month trial. So the program as a whole is likely to be 16 months. With accounting for the 12-month trial, which slightly annoyingly takes you over the natural quarterly reporting cycle, which would naturally be 15 months. So there's an extra bolt on 1 month at the end of your program. In terms of the objectives, if you're not familiar with rail industry readiness levels, please remind yourselves what they are. But we expect to see applicants arriving with rail industry readiness level 3, which is a concept. Then after the 3 months R&D, it should be RIRL4, working all the way through the trial to RIRL6 at the end, which is pretty much at the stage where you're beginning to be in a position to sell the product to Network Rail. And the intention, it's not a guarantee, but the intention is for there to be potentially a procurement exercise on the end of this program. Although this is an R&D exercise, Network Rail has an aspiration to purchase systems to deliver this solution. So please bear that in mind all the way through. What you need to show is that you're not novices in this area, that you have experience in doing similar things, that you can meet the scope requirements. It's obvious. Something about the maturity. So as we said, RIRL3 going into the competition. How are you going to work with Network Rail? How are you going to work with station staff? And that you'll build in reviews, obviously, as part of your program. Network Rail will support those, and Innovate UK will manage that process. Scalability is important. It needs to be adaptable to different stations, so small, medium, and large. I suppose potentially there could be different solutions, but the objective is to find a single solution that meets all of those requirements. Different levels of staff involvement is important. Sometimes there may be staff on hand locally, sometimes there may be staff available remotely. And we need to have an understanding of how the different scales of the deployment will affect the performance of the system. The solution, as we've said all the way through, it's written on the competition title, is to do with platform end and edge. Bear in mind the things that it must also be proven that it doesn't do, like interfering with line-side equipment, doesn't interfere with trains, doesn't mistake trains for passengers. If every time a train passed that was flagged as a trespass incident, that would keep us fairly busy, I think, in managing the system. And similarly, legitimate passengers going about their legitimate transit from a train to the exterior of the station need not or should not create triggers for the system. Additionally, there's a focus obviously on false alarms. That false alarms are good. Correct positives are good, but false alarms could impact and compromise the value of the system to Network Rail. Animals, I'm not sure about animals being allowed to trespass off the end of platforms, but they should not trigger alarms if possible. Turning off if there's maintenance guys or staff working off the end of the platform legitimately, so typically wearing high-vis jackets. There's a requirement to meet the legislation in relation to the Equality Act and medical devices, human rights, GDPR in particular. Should reset itself when trespass isn't detected. And here's a bit of a coverall, meet Network Rail specifications for use on the railway. But Network Rail, you're in a great position here. Network Rail will help you to understand what that means for your potential solution as part of working on this program. So it's a great opportunity to work with Network Rail. What it needs to do, it needs to record the number of triggered trespass incidents and to record the time and location of those incidents. Should be in use all day and every day, able to send alerts to responders, identify the location of the trespass, control or turn off alerts when there are no staff present to respond, and record data to allow for future planning and monitoring so that Network Rail gets a better understanding of where trespass is happening and where the priorities are to address it. We've said before it needs to comply with Network Rail security standards, technical and data standards. and additional information will be available. If you haven't already registered for this competition, when you do so, you will have access to some supporting technical information via the FTP site. You can download that, have a look at it for yourself, and there's some additional technical information there that we won't bore you with by presenting in a presentation. Interestingly, working up the competition scope with Network Rail, there are some things which are desirable, not compulsory, but these are listed here. Please read them for yourself. You don't have to do these things, but it'll strengthen your application if you can address some or all of these requirements. And there are 2 sheets of these. Additional. So you will get this slide pack after the event. In terms of the outputs, we've already said you've got 3 months to R&D your solution before deploying it. The trial stations will be announced when you succeed with your successful application. Then you've got a month to demonstrate that your solution is deployable on that station, and then going through the RIR level 4, you'll install your system on the station and begin the second phase of the competition, which is the demonstration on live stations. For the trial stage, the objectives are listed here. You need to demonstrate that it's done all the things that Naomi wants it to do, so detecting trespass, deterring trespass, informing station staff where there has been a trespass, delivering correct alerts with a minimum level of false positives and missed events, and integrating with Network Rail procedures and operations. And then after 9 months of trialling, although the trial is nominally for 12 months, Network Rail will begin to expect to see the behaviors from your system listed here. So basically demonstrating that it does what it was intended to do. Additional outputs from the trial stage. A key thing is that Network Rail are very keen that at the end of the trial, your system will remain installed at the station for continued demonstration. Now, we thought long and hard about this requirement. We hope you won't see this as in any way a threat. So Network Rail would like to have the system retained on the site to continue to demonstrate it, to continue to prove that it works, with a view to a wider rollout and a wider procurement exercise. So it is not an intention, nor is it allowed under SBRI rules, for this to be a procurement exercise per se. The objective is that it will continue to be available for a demonstration period to allow further assessment and demonstration to interested parties across Network Rail. After that, critically, the anticipation will be that there could be a procurement exercise, and Network Rail will be interested to procure those systems which meet the requirements and prove the most successful. Finally, to support that activity, as part of the demonstration, Network Rail would like to have a description of how your system will operate, how it will be maintained, how staff would need to be trained to use it, how well it operates, what the successes are and what the failures, how ready it is to deploy it across the entire Network Rail network, information on the safety and the integration, evidence that it is scalable, and the performance specifications of the system. Again, if you think about it, these are all things that Network Rail will need to know in order to have a wider rollout of any demonstration system. In return, you have a great opportunity in working on this program to work with the people that really matter, which of course is Network Rail. It's a rare opportunity. I judge from the number of attendees we have today that it is one that is not lost on the innovation community. It's an exquisite opportunity to work with the challenge area owners. What they will give in return, of course, is access to stations. That's something many of our projects clamour for and often have a lot of trouble in accessing. So it's terrific to have Network Rail providing that. Access to the standards, of course, product acceptance guidance, information and support for maintenance and installation, and support from the Network Rail Telecoms team. There are some things Network Rail is less interested in, and these are listed here. So surveillance analytics, facial recognition, alerts driven by social media, and geolocation and mobile phone analysis. So these are not approaches which are necessarily out of scope, but they are discouraged for this competition. There are some things we won't fund. These are fairly standard across Innovate UK. We won't fund projects which are not exploitable, so it needs to be something which has a practical potential of being deployed. The RIRL level needs to be high, so we would like applications to be within a year of being ready for market. If you've got a great idea that hasn't been proven, that's fine, but it may not be for this competition. We're looking for innovation, so we're looking for applications which create a significant change in the level of innovation. We want applications which are high maturity. We do not want applications which have high technical risk. We need a demonstration. Demonstrations are always more difficult than we think, so if you haven't experience of running trials or demonstrations on Network Rail property, please take the opportunity to talk today to the Network Rail representatives who are here. Clearly, we're looking for a demonstrator, and we want a demonstration phase. That is the deliverable from the competition. In terms of who's eligible, everyone in Europe is eligible for this competition. Any size. SBRI, as we've heard earlier this morning, stands for Small Business Research Initiative, and the small is not applicable. Any organisation is eligible to apply. The project work needs to be carried out in the UK. By that, we actually mean the demonstration will be on Network Rail property and in the UK, and we would expect your progress meetings to take place in the UK. But if you're not a UK supplier, that's fine. Just bear in mind that you need to cost in for the demonstration in the UK and progress meetings in the UK. Open to all organisations in the European Union. You can work alone. If you haven't got all the capability you require as a lead organisation, you are eligible to work with subcontractors. We don't need to know very much about those subcontracts. They're for you to arrange with the necessary specialists who can bring the expertise and the capability into your team. You should refer to them in your application, though, because they will strengthen your case to be funded. In terms of SBRI, SBRI is not an Innovate UK framework. It is a European framework. Innovate UK has a licence to deploy that framework within the UK. And it is necessary in order to receive state funding that 50% of the contract value has to be for R&D. So if you already have an existing system, that's fine, but you need to refine it, to tweak it, and to do R&D in order to be eligible for R&D funding. It's your responsibility as an organisation to ensure that you feel you are compatible and eligible for SBRI funding as part of this competition. And there are a number of tasks which are not eligible for SBRI, including commercial development, establishing commercial viability, integration, customization, or incremental adaptations. But given what you're likely to be doing as part of this program, which is tweaking a system to optimize its performance on a Network Rail station, it's likely that a significant part of your activity will be viable R&D. In terms of the background, we've already heard it this morning, but please refer to the Network Rail challenges. They will help you to write your bid, help you to make sure that you are addressing the right capabilities. Those are available via that link. In terms of the dates, this competition was published 2 weeks ago, but formally opened on Monday this week. If you haven't already registered for it, please do, and you will then have access to the supporting information. Briefing event, we're only having a single briefing event. Here we are all in London on the 5th of December. We thought long and hard about whether we were going to spoil all of your Christmases by having a competition which opened roughly now and closed on the 22nd of January, but we hope that you've got sufficient time to have a good Christmas break and still get your applications in. Registration closes on the 22nd of January, which is typically a Wednesday. I think that's probably a Wednesday, at noon. And applications close a week after that, again on noon, the 29th of January. If we like the look of your application, we'll tell you a bit more about how the assessment occurs in the applicant briefing session later on today. If we like your application and it is assessed highly, we'll invite teams with high-scoring applications to be interviewed in Swindon in the week commencing of 9th of March. Following that, there'll be a finalisation of the process working with Network Rail, and we will let successful and unsuccessful applicants know on the 20th of March. We'll be doing that with a view to issuing the contracts on the 17th of April, and there's a strong desire to get projects underway on the 1st of May in order to meet the stringent timescales of the overall programme. We've done this once before. We ran two competitions on behalf of Network Rail just a couple of months ago. So I'll give you a quick insight into how those progressed. Some stats on the competitions are there. We ran through a competition briefing very much like this. We have an objective to fund 8 projects in the theme Security Surveillance Analytics and 3 in this theme of automated tunnel examination. Both those competitions have been well subscribed, but there was a good level of opportunity for the teams bidding into them. So if this competition follows a similar timescale, we think there is a good opportunity for you as applicants to get funding and critically to work with Network Rail. The type of errors we saw get refreshed every time we run a competition. So every time we run a competition, applicants find a new way to become ineligible. And this is very, very frustrating. The typical application errors we see, so please don't tell us we haven't told you, are incomplete applications. The application form has a number of questions. To an extent, each question is scored equally. So blank questions are fine, but for that question, you will then end up scoring 0 out of 10. So it's very difficult to subsequently get funding. So when you get your application forms, please review it, and no matter how excited we are about the technology, please remember that the assessors will score the entire application, not just the technology. So things like your teaming and your partnering is important. Things like your commercialization plan is critically important, because if there isn't a commercialization plan, then frankly, we don't really want to progress with the demonstration and the R&D. It's all about getting these systems onto the railway. The number of applications we get where the costs are outside the bounds we have presented here today, you would be surprised. If you apply for a project with £1 more or £1 less than the, I forget what we said, 200k to 360k, then sadly your application doesn't even go for assessment. So please be very, very careful in crafting your application. Don't let your subcontractors push you over the eligibility requirements for the budgets. Your project costs cannot be too high, nor can they be too low. Yes, it's great to be cheap, but we've actually stipulated what the lower limit of the funding bounds are. And as I've said before, the way that we're delivering this competition, everything we are quoting here does not include VAT, but on your application you should include VAT. So the funding you can effectively bid for is 200 to 360k plus 20%. RON collaborators, that's for you to review the scope documents and decide what collaborators you need. We need to have evidence that your team can deliver a demonstration. It's really something that needs to be fleshed out in your application. If we don't believe you can deliver a demonstration, there's a risk of being deemed ineligible. Broken application forms. Our application forms are fairly stringent and robust and not easy to unlock. That's for a good reason. The application form is roughly 10 pages of A4. If the application form is broken and becomes longer than that, then you have an unfair advantage over other applicants. Therefore, we sadly will rule that ineligible. So please don't open the documents in anything that allows you to change the font size or extend the number of pages. Inappropriate level of maturity. We've given you clear guidelines what sort of level of maturity Network Rail are expecting here. Being late, I know that's, again, self-evident. The competition closes at 12 noon. We do get a lot of pleas from organisations submitting at 12:01, 12:02, saying that they were only a couple of minutes late. But unfortunately, that is the robust laws. And much as I might sympathise with that, within the Innovate UK machine, we can't flex. And this is the new fault we had the last time. It's a risk, I guess, of running two briefing against side by side. We had applications for one competition into the other competition from the last pair of briefing events. We never knew whether they were good applications, and it's again, it may seem a bit petty to disqualify them on that basis, but you can't, if you bid into the wrong competition, the application isn't eligible and doesn't go for assessment. It's painful because I know how much time teams put into these applications, having done it myself for many years, but we have to have a framework, unfortunately. So please, when you register for this competition and download your pack, make sure it's the right one and not our friends next door talking about alternative gauging. I've showed this graph many times. This shows the typical pattern for teams submitting their applications. I know you like to live dangerously. The x-axis here is not linear, it's sort of logarithmic. So the green curve shows the number of applications submitted, and the blue curve shows the number of applications past 50% but not submitted in the last few hours and then minutes of a competition close. This isn't a rail competition, but it's not untypical. So what you see is from about 11 o'clock, you see the number of unsubmitted applications at about 75%. So the 15 minutes left, if there's an IT problem or anything else, then these run the risk of not being submitted. And all the way through till 12 noon close, I think there were 17 applications here which were nearly finished but never got submitted, which is roughly 10%, and that's a shame. Maybe the teams had walked away and changed their minds, but there is a risk in submitting at the last minute. We all know the psychology. You think that just one last crossing of the I's or crossing of the T's or dotting the I's will make the difference between funding and not. Generally, it isn't the case. And I can guarantee that not getting your application submitted makes a bigger difference between funding and not. So please make sure to get it in. Top tips then, read the scope and the guidelines. If I was you, after you've read the scope documents and then in a flurry of excitement written your application, before you click submit, I'd reread the scope documents again to make sure that you've actually addressed the questions. The best applications we see would probably cut and paste bits of the scope back to us and say, the reason I am compliant with this scope requirement is because I am going to do A, B, and C. Pay attention to the outcomes. Is there really a need for your project? Does it address the network rail challenges as they've been described to you? Is it within scope? Why is it innovative? Critically, what's the route to market? There is a question about commercialization. To a technologist like I am, that is often a less interesting question. It is a really important question in the context of this competition. We need teams to understand how they're going to develop their solution, yes. How they're going to demonstrate their solution, yes. But then what? So how are you going to produce, how many stations have you got, Naomi? 20,000? 20
that we manage.
Okay. Okay, so there are thousands of stations. So can you manufacture thousands of these systems if Network Rail opt to go for a procurement of your demonstration? And please, please, please do take care not to go beyond the eligibility requirements. It causes us immense pain when we see a fantastic application coming in, which we can't send for assessment. I can't stress that enough. It is amazing how often we see red flag projects that can't go for assessment because no matter what the assessors say, no matter how good an application it is, it's not eligible for funding because it's missed something, be that the budget or the format or the teaming requirements, or is just not innovative. Hopefully you've all found the competition information. It is in those links there, which you can take away with you. And there is a supporting document called Further Guidance for Applicants. Have a look at that as well. And if in the coming weeks you have any questions about the scope, be those questions relating to the application process or more likely to do with Network Rail's technical requirements, please email them in to the email address you see there. And we pledged to have a turnaround of 2 working days on that. In the case of working, here you have Innovate UK working with Network Rail. Those 2 working days can flex a bit because we often have to seek advice from our colleagues in Network Rail. But if you have questions, that is your route to ask them. And once they've been asked through that route, that then should be definitive. And as well, Rob, if teams have any questions about the Innovate UK application process and would like any help, particularly towards the end of your application, then the KTM will provide a free service to review your applications or to generally answer questions in a way that Innovate UK finds more difficult. Because we're intrinsically involved in the competition process, we often can't offer advice, but the KTN are in a position where very often they can provide useful advice, having been through many competitions like this before. So that's all I had to say. And we're going to break for questions. Is that right, Rob?
It is, yes.
Very good.
Thank you very much, Kelvin.
So I think we're going to invite our Network Rail colleagues.
Yes, so if we can invite the Network Rail colleagues to come up. Naomi, the challenge owner for this particular competition, but Charlie, Katie, Wayne as well, if you'd like to come up to the stage as a panel here. And we open up to the floor now and also to our colleagues that are on the webinar. If you could type any questions in to the chat box, and Simon will then be your voice here today. What I'd like to also say is, anybody, if you've got a question, if you could just say your name and affiliation, wait for the microphone to come, because obviously the people online would like to hear your question as well. So without further ado, there's a gentleman at the back. Thank you very much.
Hello, this is Nick from BlockDocs. A question for Network Rail. In terms of the background context, what approaches have you already tried, and why have they failed?
Shall I go? So we've obviously tried the gates. We've got security guards in some locations. We've got the witches' hats. We've got signs. We've got CCTV. There's lots of different things that have been tried, and there hasn't been one thing that's found to work. There's different things that work better together, but there's nothing that stopped it altogether. Does that help?
That's good context. In terms of technology in particular, what else have you tried?
So we've had things like CCTV cameras that can trigger an alert. However, where that alert goes to and whether or not it works in relation to the electromagnetic fields and things have been a challenge. And we've had sensors just to count when people are going over, so we know how many people are in that location. We've tried wildlife cameras to pick up on the detection of it. It's very difficult to deter with technology unless it's got other stuff with it.
And is there anything that you've seen in overseas markets, for example, which you've thought is interesting, which you would like to try?
I particularly like the Japanese gates. However, they're far too expensive and our network is far too big and old to be able to put that in, but it looks great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Simon, we have one at the front, and then gentleman down here next, please. Thank you very much. Simon, do you want to ask your question?
So I've got a few questions from the web. So Aparna Garg from Transpix asks about cameras and whether they are in scope and how that works with the surveillance question in the scope. You said it wasn't ideal to have surveillance systems.
Yeah, so cameras are in scope. It really depends on how we're going to use those cameras. So we mentioned that we're not interested in facial recognition for this, that sort of thing. I think it's important to reiterate what Naomi said earlier. This isn't about preventing people from committing suicide. This is about preventing people from doing something silly like trying to get from one side of the platform to the other. So it's not really about who they are, it's about what they're doing. So obviously there are a number of different sort of camera systems that you can link to, zones or virtual fencing, that sort of thing. Those sort of CCTV systems are fine, but they need to work with something that's going to deter a person from doing something silly. So if I'm about to walk off the end of a platform into an unsafe position on the railway, you could pick that up on a camera, sure, because I've walked into a particular zone that camera is covering. You need something else to try and stop the person, because a camera on its own isn't going to stop the person from doing it, because CCTV is so much part of normal daily life now that most people tend to ignore it anyway. So it's not about who the person is, it's about what the person's doing. So that was the only reason why CCTV surveillance, we mentioned that sort of facial recognition isn't a thing that we're looking for this.
Perfect, thank you. Gentleman at the front, please. Thank you. Just wait for the microphone. Lovely.
Thanks. I've got a couple of three questions that are related. The first one's very simple, just to confirm that the requirement is to deliver 2 complete demonstration systems and run them for 12 months in parallel. Okay.
Yes, people are nodding.
Just to elaborate on that, the idea is that one would be in more of a basic location and one would be in more advanced, so that's to demonstrate the scalability of your solution. Okay, and as there's a 2-step TRL level change between that, can you assume therefore that you're allowed to do development work on the system during that 12-month period? That's right, yes. Okay. You say in the report that you want to see evidence of false positives and false negatives during the 12-month period. That kind of implies that you've got something else, like a person or some other system, which is actually able to guarantee what the ground truth was. Can you comment on that?
So I think that's more around, we want to measure how many false positives and negatives we get so we can see how well the system works. What we don't want is something that's going to make multiple alerts for station staff that have to respond to those alerts. If it's always a false positive, that there's nothing happening, because people will get weary of having to respond to something that isn't. So it's more of a way of measuring.
I quite understand that, and for a manned platform, it's probably fairly straightforward to count the number of times the system pinged off when somebody can verify there was nothing actually going on. But the other way around, not seeing something that did happen is harder unless there's something actually continuously looking for it. Like you've got a camera looking at the end of the platform, which you subsequently look at the logs for. So it's a question really about the depth to which you're expecting that information to be very...
So I think that would relate to, it might not be a technical solution. So if somebody's walked off the edge of the platform and the solution we put in place hasn't detected that, and we therefore have to, the trains are delayed because we've got to slow them through that section or whatever because there is a trespass going on, we know that solution hasn't picked up someone who did something.
But you're okay with it if it's just done on the basis of the incidents that were spotted, but you're not requiring somebody to make sure that they...
we wouldn't expect somebody to sit and go
with a clipboard
sit and check it.
looking.
No.
Okay, all right.
Oh, that was a good job for students, I think.
And just one last little bit. Does each of those two demonstration systems need to cover, say, the entirety of the platform, or can you say prove that you can cover half of the platform edge on one end of the platform, and therefore, if with double the size of system, you could potentially protect the whole platform?
So I think we had in mind that we would be covering the whole of that station. So I think...
The problem with doing it that way is that all you'll do is move the problem to the other end of the platform, so you won't get an accurate judgment of how well it's working, because if you can't walk off that end, they'll just walk off the other end.
So it's two systems which cover the entirety of the platform?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, right. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Simon, have you got one more from the web audience, please?
Yes, so I've got one more from the web, from James Cannon. He asked about battery-powered solutions. I saw mentioned in the scope that they are desirable. So I think the question is about how weighted that is to the scope to have battery-powered solutions for the surveillance or for the equipment.
So I don't think it has to be entirely battery-powered. So we may also use that as a backup. There may be some locations where getting power to a solution is difficult. So again, it needs to be scalable so that we could use it somewhere where there is power, but also then you want a backup if the power fails. We still want the solution to be able to function. And there may be other locations where getting power to the solution is more difficult, and we may it may need to run on batteries. So yes, it's quite important for the scope.
Thank you. Gentleman next to you, Natasha, thank you very much.
Ben May from Interactual. I've got a couple of questions. First one is practical. You're saying that there's two sites. Are they going to be Network Rail sites, one of the 20, or could be there anywhere? Because I'm thinking from a practical point of view, if you're talking about, you were suggesting entire station. Now, if that's King's Cross, that's a big demonstrator. But if you're talking about one platform, is it both ends? So I'm thinking from a practical point of view, if you're costing this, you've got to work out how much kit you've got to put in, and also where you've got to travel to install it,
yeah.
That kind of thing.
So we are looking at different size of stations. Where we've got large stations, we wouldn't expect you to be covering the whole thing. So if we were using King's Cross, for example, it might be one or two platforms, but no more than that. At small stations, they've only got two anyway, and in some cases, just one. So.
Okay. Relating to the RIRL level, is for you to say, I've got your chart that shows all the TRL levels and MRL levels and everything and how that matches up. It says that you're at that level when all of those are complete. So are we talking about going from RIRL level 3 complete and you're starting RIR level 4, or are we talking about that level 4 is complete and we're going into 5 and 6?
So your application should demonstrate that you have already achieved level 3.
Right.
And then your 3 months will be to develop your solution to meet level 4. Before it's installed, we'll go through an internal process to kind of confirm that you've met that stage gate.
And in the system, the Network Rail's own protocol for reliability, there's a bunch of preconditions in terms of information that Network Rail provides as a starting point, which is a number of things in there. Is all that stuff going to be filled in and provided, or are we assuming that the suppliers have already done that work for themselves? Because there's a whole load of predefined work. I'll just put it up just so we can just for clarity. So it's establish reliability, availability, and maintainability targets, establish environments and duty cycle requirements, develop customer requirements, develop the whole life cycle model template. That's stuff that's meant to come from Network Rail. Is that stuff that you'll be, because that's part of the compliance to achieve RIR level 4?
So as long as you can achieve RIRL3 at the point of application, we will work quite closely with you through the development stage to help you meet all of those next stages. So we will provide support in getting all of those things together and make sure you've got the right format and everything for it.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Sort of, yeah.
Thank you. Gentleman behind, thank you very much. Just to your right, thank you. And then we'll bring the microphone down because there's a couple of 3 questions at the front. Thank you.
Hi, Nigel Ward from Fleur. Can I ask you why analytics is not being considered? Because when you mentioned about the witch's hat, people climbing over that is an ideal product.
So analytics is being considered. It's not something that we're discounting. It's just the facial recognition part of that we were not considering.
Right. Okay.
So if you've got a system that analyzes how someone's behaving, in the way that they're approaching the edge of the platform or whatever, if that's what your solution is, then you need to demonstrate to us that can help us to fix the problem. I don't think we have said that analytics is being discounted from this.
Right, because I saw surveillance analytics on there.
Yeah, I think it's just that's the terminology that we're using for the security surveillance analytics project.
Right, okay.
And we're trying to make sure that you all know that those 2 projects are different in what we're trying to achieve.
Okay, that answers my question.
Thank you very much. If you come to the gentleman down the front here, we'll come to you, sir. Lady here, there's a lady at the back, and we'll work our way around. No problems. We've got plenty of time for questions, so don't worry.
Hi there. My name's Stephen Green-Price from ACOM, and I think we all know how important it is to adhere to Network Rail standards, but my question is, how open are Network Rail to the potential for derogation from possibly restrictive standards that allow greater freedom for innovation?
Go ahead then. You're leaning forward.
So as long as it doesn't impact on safety, then we can consider it, but we can't say, no, we'll just take it away. It depends on why it's there rather than what it is. So essentially, if it's going to impact on somebody's safety, then absolutely it will not be changed. But if there's other reasons for it, then we might be able to look at it.
So we would have to work with the professional head of whoever owns the standard that you're looking for a derogation against to see whether we could include that in our innovation piece.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you. There's a gentleman at the front here. Natasha, thank you. Oh, wait, can you wait for the microphone? Thank you, sir.
My name is Sanjay Kumar from Kumar Consultant. My question is, it's primarily I have participated in the earlier one, which is for the video surveillance analytics. And one of the problems that we faced is that in the local server, you cannot store too much of data. I can understand that in this particular case, we can use local server, whether it is powered by normal power or battery back. But depending upon for how long you want to keep the data, maybe you would like to keep the data for 6 months. For some future reference or investigation or whatever, in that case, can we transfer some of the data to the cloud? Is that acceptable? So the immediate data for, immediate data for, 15 days or a month on the local server, but the historic data can be archived on the cloud. Is that something which is acceptable?
Yes, as long as we can obviously maintain the requirements of as long as we meet the requirements of GDPR, Data Protection Act, then we're fine. If you're using technology that's capturing any form of data, we're not really talking about any personal data here at all. This is a system that's designed to detect and deter, or deter and detect, that way around is better, obviously, people from trespassing off the edge or end of a platform. We don't need to know who those people are. I know we might be in some circumstances, if you're using CCTV capturing someone's image, as long as we protect that, the way that we all know it's got to be protected under the Data Protection Act, then I don't have any issues with storing it in the cloud. The difficulty you might have is that some of the stations, or most of the stations that we're talking about here, might not have that network connectivity straight away.
Yeah, I know.
Usually, if we're talking about CCTV data at stations, we store 28 days worth of data. If nothing has happened that needs to be looked into, we just record over the top of that. Unless an incident has happened that needs further investigation, in which case we usually take that incident off the data before it's deleted. We don't keep it for very long.
Understand. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
It's probably quickly worth adding, as part of creating your application, you will have to self-certify that you're GDPR compliant. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Jaana Tarma, Krastinus Service Design Agency. We usually start from trying to understand why people have certain behaviors, and as Naomi pointed out, there are a number of different things. First question is, would we have access to accumulated data of, for example, user behavior groups, kids playing on the tracks, commuters rushing to finding the fastest way to their platform, drunks falling off, youth engaging in vandalism and so on? And would you consider an application which addresses some of these, but not all of these groups?
Yes.
Thank you very much. And there was a gentleman at the back, if you could just put your hand up if you wanted. There was yourself as well. I think you wanted to ask a question. Yes, thank you very much. Sorry.
Rebecca from Selic Rail. I think caucus of us at the back anyway are still struggling with what sorts of stations you've got in mind and how big this is and where it is, because it will take a jolly long time to get somewhere remote in Scotland and back again to support a project over a year. And there are a lot of stations.
I think
Is the vision to have, you've got 3 or 4 projects that you're aiming to sponsor at 8 stations, and can you give us any more of a handle on how long it might take us to get to them and how many bits of kit we're going to need to install to cover how many platforms? Because that seems a big, huge variable in all this.
Yeah, so we haven't identified all the stations that we're looking at, but we have a list of stations where the risk is high, basically, of these things going on. And I think we've identified a couple of areas, which I can't remember off the top of my head where they are.
If it helps, none of them are in the back of Scotland that we're looking at. So currently the ones that we're looking at are, I think the furthest north is just above Preston, and the furthest south is on the south coast.
And Rebecca, there is some additional information in the documents that you will get access to if you register, although it doesn't specifically nominate which stations, but it gives some close guidelines with a view to helping you to cost your application.
So we need to work with the different regions and routes of Network Rail to decide where we're going to run these trials. And until we've decided that, it's a little bit difficult for us to say exactly where those stations are going to be.
Okay, Simon, have we got anybody else from the web? Do you want to see if anybody else on the web has got any questions for us? If you have, we will be slopping fairly soon. So if you're on the web and would like to ask a question, please do type it in now. Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
What happens if during the trial there isn't a trespasser at the nominated station?
Then well done. You've worked.
Absolutely. All the locations that we are looking at are known trespass hotspots. So if you didn't have anything at all, your technology is amazing.
And the other question is, will all of the selected projects be trialling at the same stations to benchmark them against each other?
No, because otherwise you won't be able to work out which one's working best. But they will be comparable stations.
Thank you.
Okay. Who else would, any other questions from the audience? Yes. So what we'll do is we'll work our way back down and come to you certainly towards the end, sir.
Thanks. Mark from GJD. Just going back to the server query, is there a preference to use or not use cloud-based servers compared with local? No.
There's no preference. You tell us what works best for you. We'll tell you if you can use it in that location.
Thank you.
Will Loader from Focus Sensors. I've got two questions. One of them is sort of a double-ended one. Are there any access to development sites, and can we use Network Rail existing assets?
So we have development sites. They spoke about them this morning. This trial is to run in some actual stations. The development sites are very quiet. Not a lot happens there, so it's difficult to judge, what the real railway is like at our development sites. Because although trains run there, passengers don't get on and off them, and I don't think there's any proper sort of station platform ends or edges at those sites. So it depends what you're talking about. If it's integrating with systems, then we could possibly look at that beforehand. But really, we're just looking at something that can go straight into a station environment.
Thanks. And the other quick question was, is your target price similar to the competition price?
It's the what, sorry?
End target price, once you develop something.
Oh, I don't do money.
Target price.
I don't know.
I have a quick question for you while we're just bringing the microphone down. Are the people who are going to run these trials for you allowed to put some test people, obviously in times that are suitable to Network Rail, onto the track and across just to prove that it's working in that environment?
Within the realms of safety.
Okay. And again, it's something they can negotiate with yourselves at time of day and when it can be done. Okay,
We
thank you
need to
very
set up a safe system of work for them to be able to do it.
absolutely,
And make
but-
sure there's no running trains.
Absolutely, of course, but there's options there as well.
You might have to do it at 4 o'clock in the morning.
That's great. As long as it's not in the middle of Scotland, that's fine. Yes, sir.
Hi, Neil Appleton from the NCC. What is the duty of care to potential trespassers? We're talking around sort of physical barriers. How badly can the potential trespasser be damaged by the system?
Ooh.
Do you mean how badly can the technology damage the trespasser? They can't. These are people. You can't damage the people. That's not nice.
Yeah. But even with your current witch's hat, you could see someone twisting an ankle on that and then bringing a claim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, that would have to be risk assessed and would have to be done within the realms of safety. We would have to build a safety case around whatever your proposed solution was. Some people have suggested that we might be able to deter people if they were sprayed with a forensic marking solution. So that would obviously assist with, you put signage up, that deters them from going near the end of the platform. If they go past a certain point, you get sprayed with a solution, forensic marking solution. If they then go ahead and trespass, you've got two things then. You can then go and find them later on. The police can go and find them, and they are covered with this stuff, which puts them in a certain place, at that time. And then you've got the CCTV imagery to back that up.
That's not a suggestion.
That's not a suggestion. That is, that is just something that may have been thought about in the past. There are lots of different ways to deter people from doing something. What we don't want to do is hurt anybody. That is not, we're not looking at hurting anybody. Anything you suggest, obviously, would have to go through a safety case and a
Perfect.
A risk
Then we've
assessment.
got one last question at the front, at the back. Does anybody else have any burning questions? Because I know the team are going to be here for the rest of today. We're certainly over lunch anyway, and we are going to break for lunch in a second. So you might be the last question, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Neil Owen, Createc. Could you just give us some clarity on the difference between detection and deterrent? Because clearly, obviously, what you'd want to do is to have a ground truth from the detection system to be able to check whether the deterrent system was actually doing what you expect it to do.
Yeah, deterrent, we want it to stop. So actually, if the detection rates go down, then great, it's deterring.
So is the scope to include somebody to provide a solution to both detect and deter?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. Simon, do we have any more questions from the online audience? Okay, thank you very much indeed. I'd like to say thank you very much to the online audience who are on the webinar. Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed that and got a lot from that, as the audience have here today as well. We're going to stop the online recording now, so thank you very much indeed for our colleagues that are on the internet and watching this. Thank you, goodbye. And everybody in the room, we're going to break for lunch now, and lunch is outside, and this afternoon we'll commence back in an hour's time next door, where we'll go through the competition process, and we'll have the elevator pitches, and then after that further networking opportunities. So thank you very much. Enjoy your lunch.